She kept her head down as the cold water ran over her hands, the clatter of plates louder than the laughter behind her, and in that moment it felt like the whole room had agreed she didn't belong there, like her existence had been reduced to soap and silence, and no one cared enough to ask why she was standing there in a black uniform while others wore silk and diamonds, because just an hour ago she had walked into that grand mansion with quiet dignity, holding her invitation tightly, believing she had every right to be there, but one sharp voice changed everything, one cruel accusation, and suddenly she was no longer a guest, she was the help, forced into the kitchen while whispers followed her like shadows, and she didn't argue, she didn't shout, she just nodded softly and stepped away, because she had learned long ago that sometimes silence protects you more than words ever could, and as she washed each plate, her mind drifted back to the life she had chosen, the man she had trusted, the quiet marriage no one knew about, the promises made in a small room far away from this world of glitter and arrogance, and she wondered if he would understand what was happening to her now, if he would be angry, or if he would simply tell her to stay calm like he always did, because he believed in patience, in timing, in letting truth reveal itself when it mattered most, and so she breathed slowly, steadying her heart, even as the voices grew louder behind her, even as the two women who had humiliated her laughed again, pointing in her direction as if she were part of the evening's entertainment, their words cutting through the air with effortless cruelty. "Some people really don't know their place," one of them said, her voice dripping with mockery, and the other replied, "At least she's useful now," and they both laughed again, unaware that every word reached her ears, unaware that their confidence came from ignorance, not power. And still she stayed quiet, because deep inside she held onto something they could never see, something stronger than pride, stronger than anger. It was a quiet hope, a belief that truth had its own way of arriving, and that patience was not weakness, it was strength in disguise, and so she kept washing, plate after plate, her hands moving automatically while her thoughts wandered to the man who had placed a simple ring on her finger, the man who never cared for grand displays or public attention, the man who had told her, "Our life doesn't need their approval," and she had believed him, she still did, even now, even here, even as she stood in a place that belonged to him more than anyone else in that room, though no one knew it yet, and time passed slowly, each minute stretching like an hour, until the kitchen door opened again and a tall figure stepped inside, his presence instantly changing the air, his expression serious, almost unreadable. And for a brief moment she froze, her heart skipping a beat as she recognized him, but she didn't speak, she didn't move toward him, because she knew this was not the moment, not yet, and he looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the uniform, the wet hands, the quiet pain in her eyes, and something in his gaze shifted, something deep and controlled, like a storm held back by sheer will, and he asked softly, "Who told you to do this?" His voice calm but heavy with meaning, and before she could answer, one of the women appeared at the door, her confident smile returning as she saw him. "Oh, there you are," she said, her tone suddenly sweet, almost rehearsed. "We had a small issue, but it's handled now," and she gestured toward the woman at the sink as if presenting a solution rather than a person, and for a moment there was silence, thick and undeniable, as his eyes moved from the woman speaking to the one standing quietly by the sink, and then he stepped forward, his presence commanding without effort, and he said, very clearly, "No, it's not handled," and the room seemed to hold its breath, the laughter outside fading into a distant echo as the weight of his words settled in, and the woman at the door blinked, confused, her confidence cracking just slightly. "I don't understand," she replied, but he didn't look at her anymore, his attention fixed entirely on the one who had been humiliated, the one who had endured in silence, and his voice softened as he spoke again, "You shouldn't be here like this," and something in those words broke the tension inside her, not into anger, but into a quiet release, because she knew now that the moment had arrived, the truth she had been waiting for, the justice she had trusted would come, not loudly, not violently, but firmly, undeniably, and he turned back to the others, his expression now cold, unyielding. "This event is held in my home," he said, each word measured, each pause deliberate, "and she is my wife," and the silence that followed was absolute, complete, as if the world itself had paused to understand what had just been said, and the two women who had laughed moments ago stood frozen, their faces draining of color, their certainty collapsing into disbelief, and no one spoke, because there was nothing left to say, the truth had spoken for itself, And it was louder than any accusation, stronger than any arrogance, and in that moment, the balance shifted completely, the power they thought they held disappearing like smoke, replaced by something far more real, far more undeniable, respect. And he stepped closer to her, gently taking her hand, his touch steady, reassuring. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," he said quietly, and she nodded, her eyes finally lifting, not with anger, not with pride, but with calm strength, because she had never needed their approval, she had only needed time, and as they walked out of the kitchen together, the room beyond fell silent, every eye turning toward them, every whisper fading into nothing, and the same people who had ignored her before now watched in stunned silence, their expressions shifting from curiosity to realization, and the two women who had mocked her stood at the center of it all, unable to move, unable to speak, because for the first time they understood the cost of their arrogance, the weight of their actions, and the truth they had tried to dismiss, and she didn't look back at them, she didn't need to, because justice had already been served, not through revenge, not through anger, but through truth, patience, and quiet strength, and as the evening continued, the atmosphere changed, conversations softened, laughter became careful, and respect, once absent, filled the space where judgment had lived, and she stood beside her husband, no longer invisible, no longer underestimated, but exactly who she had always been, someone strong enough to endure, patient enough to wait, and deserving enough to be seen, and in the end, it wasn't the mansion, the wealth, or the power that mattered, it was the quiet resilience that had carried her through the humiliation, the belief that justice would come without needing to be forced, and the understanding that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who say the least, but endure the most, and when their moment finally arrives, it doesn't need to be loud, it only needs to be true.